What is up, everybody? Welcome to DFS by the Numbers. This is my betting breakdown video for UFC London. We have Tom Aspinall going against Marcin Tybura.
I need all the wins, yeah. Harder than all it is. You better move, you might get knocked out. Knocked out. You better move, you might get knocked out. Knocked out. You better move, you might get knocked out.
And we are back for another betting breakdown video this week, breaking down UFC London. We have a 15-fight card, and surprisingly, no fights are off thus far. I mean, we still have time, but yeah, so far, no fights off. All 15 fights good to go. All 30 fighters made weight as well, so that was a pleasant surprise. So yeah, should be a good card. I think there's a ton of spots sticking out from a betting perspective, and as a fan, I think this is going to be a very good card. It's an early start time as well, so looking forward to that also. Before we get started and get into the picks and the bets, if you guys can please leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, does help out, go a long way. And if you guys could also be sure to check out dfsbythenumbers.com. There you will find all my other content outside that you do not see on YouTube, early bets, the stats you see here, and just tons of stuff, articles, all that good stuff. So be sure to check that out. I'm going to be getting ahead for UFC 291. I have taped about half the fights, got about half the fights left to go, and I think next week is another great betting card as well. So looking forward to that. But we have UFC London here. We're going to get right into it. We're going to start with the first fight on the card. And we have Julio Filho going against Daniel Alvarez. I think this is a very well-matched fight. I think it's a fight where both of these guys are very dangerous. I like the striking of Alvarez. I like the fact that he really digs to the body. I've seen him hurt and finish guys multiple times to the body. The grappling's solid as well, but I think he's going to want to do his best not to get this fight down to the mat, do his best to keep this fight standing. If he does, I think he's live for a knockout. Julio Filho, I think his striking solid as well. He has some power, but it's his grappling that really impresses me. It's a fight where I like violence here to kick off the card. I like the under 2.5. I like the fight doesn't go to decision. I was able to get the fight doesn't go plus 100 for 1 unit. I think the fight doesn't go around minus 120 a pick'em right now. It's still a very solid look just because both guys are going to be dangerous wherever the fight goes. I think both guys have power. Both guys have a submission game. You take a look at these finish rates for flyweights. Filho, 93% finish rate. The last time this guy's seen the scorecards was like 2014. So I just think there's a lot of finishing opportunities to kick off the card. Give me some violence here. I'm on that fight doesn't go. Moving on, we got Bruno Brazil going against Sean O'Bannon. Pass spot for me. It's probably a dog or pass spot, but I think I'm just going to sit back and watch this fight. I still want to learn a little bit more about Bannon. I think she's okay. She has not fought the best competition in the world. I think Brazil's probably the more skilled fighter overall, but I think Bannon does have a path to victory in terms of mixing in the takedowns. We see Bannon do that a lot outside of the UFC. We'll see if that can translate here, but should be a pretty close fight. Probably goes the distance. Not something I really want to put much money on here, so it's going to be a pass for me. Next, we got Chris Duncan going against Yanal Ashmos. Yeah, it's a fight where I see this fight really going one of two ways, honestly. I think if Chris Duncan wins this fight, it's because he's using that wrestling, that grappling, pushing Ashmos against the cage, taking him down across 15 minutes. And we saw that in Chris Duncan's last fight against Omar Morales, where Duncan's typically a guy who wants to go out there, stand and bang, test his chin, and boy, does he ever. The guy's super hittable, and we saw him, get hurt multiple times. We saw him get hurt on the Contender Series twice against Borshev and against that other dude where he got dropped and then came back and got the knockout in his own right? So I think Duncan is going out there and going to try to grapple here. If it turns out Duncan wants to go out there, test his chin, Ashmos probably knocks him out. So the two ways I'm looking to play this fight would actually be Duncan by decision, or it would be the Ashmos inside the distance or the finish only. I'm personally on the finish only. I got it at plus 160 for 1 unit. It has now been bet down to plus 110, plus 112. I still like that plus money shot on the finish only because I think that if Ashmos does win this fight, it is inside the distance. And if Duncan wins this fight, I guess he could finish Ashmos, but I kind of lean more towards the decision there. So give me the finish only for Ashmos in this one. Moving on, we got Ketlin Vieira going against Pandy Kanzad. Nothing sticking out here. I think it's a close fight. I think it goes the distance. I'm going to pick Kanzad for the upset, but no confidence and not confident enough to put a bet on it. So pretty easy pass for me. Moving on, we got Makhmud Muradov going against Barbara Reina. We have a couple bets here. So I have a parlay. I have two parlays on this card, and then Makhmud Muradov is going to be a parlay piece for me. I did parlay him at minus 285 and he's around minus 350. I still think he's parlayable, and here's why. Not really sure why Barberena is coming up a weight class here on a 2-fight skid. You would think that Barberena would probably try to get back on track with the win, but tough matchup coming up a weight class. Barberena, he's solid. He has solid cardio, but his takedown defense is always a concern. I actually think Makhmudmuradov can implement takedowns here. It's going to be Makhmudmuradov who's the bigger fighter. He's going to be landing the harder shots. We've seen Barberena, who was once, next level durable. We've seen that durability start to wane a little bit. I think Muradov probably finishes this fight. So not only do I have Muradov in a parlay, but I also put a half unit on Makhmudmuradov to win inside the distance, plus 135. And then I also sprinkled his submission props, round 2 sub, plus 3,200, 0.15 units, and then round 3 sub, plus 5,000 for 0.10 units. I think a knockout is definitely more likely, but at these numbers, in a fight where I think he probably does grapple, we've seen Barberena subbed multiple times in the UFC, in his last 2 fights even, and, Muradov using that size, it would not shock me if he's able to go out there, implement that grappling, and potentially get a sub at some point in this fight, but I think inside the distance is probably the best way to go. So very heavily invested on Makhmudmuradov this week. I think it's a very good matchup for him. Moving on, we got Jamal Pogue going against Michael Parkin, and weird circumstances at weigh-ins today, at least for me. So Jamal Pogue weighed in at 266, which was a shock. To me, honestly, this is a guy that actually made his MMA debut at middleweight, which, that was only like a handful of years ago. He's fought the majority of fights at light heavyweight. I think this is only his 3rd fight at heavyweight. I remember he came on the Contender Series weighing in around like 240 something. He just looked very out of shape. And now he's coming in 266, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I didn't think he looked that great. But yeah, just Jamal Pogue weighing in at 266 kind of shocks me a little bit because this guy's a light heavyweight. So in terms of a bet, one bet that does really stick out, it's the finish only for Michael Parkin. There's a couple finish only spots I really like this week, and this is one of them. It's minus 120 currently. I have 1.5 units on it. Jamal Pogue, just not a finisher. This guy does not have much power in his hands. Like I said, he's a natural light heavyweight. Jamal Pogue is a guy that only has a 50% finish rate, which on the flip side, you have Michael Parkin, who is the more natural heavyweight. This guy, Parkin, has a 100% finish rate, and Jamal Pogue has been finished in 100% of his losses, 2 by sub and 1 by knockout, and those losses all came at light heavyweight, a weight class down, and once at middleweight as well, I think. But either way, Parkin, there's just so many question marks on this guy. There's a lot of unknowns, but he trains with very, very good guys. He is the more natural heavyweight. I think Parkin's going to have opportunities to finish this fight, whether it hits the mat, whether it's on the feet. He has a lot of power. And Pogue's coming in, did not look to be in the best shape. If this fight does get extended, and maybe Pogue's does slow down, like he typically does anyway. So I don't mind some Parkin, but I am on that finish only, 1.5 units, minus 120. I think that even the money line, it is kind of a shot in the dark, but just with how Pogue's looked on the, at weigh-ins today, I think it's a solid look as a dog. Moving on, we have Joe Alvarez going against Mark Diakese. So I like Alvarez in this fight. And I like violence in this fight as well. If you like Diakese, you like non-violence, you like probably Diakese by decision. Diakese round 3 decision is another spot that you would probably like if you're on the Diakese side. I am not on that side. I'm on the Alvarez side. This is a guy that I was never really too high on, has kind of grown on me a little bit. I think it's a matchup where, it's weird seeing Alvarez as a favorite, just due to the fact that this guy does not win minutes. He's a really good grappler that does not shoot takedowns. But on the feet, he's super dangerous. He's huge for the division. He hits so hard. I can see him hurting Diakese on the feet. And then if Diakese does go to that wrestling, I can see, Alvarez snatching up a submission off his back, like he typically does. So I like Alvarez here. I think the under 1.5 at plus money is a very solid look this week. Alvarez has had only, I think, 2 fights in his entire career go over 1.5 rounds. I went with the fight won't start round 3, DraftKings Sportsbook, 1.5 units at minus 150. Give me those extra 2.5 minutes. I think Alvarez finishes this fight before that 3rd round starts. But like I said, if you like Diakese 3rd round or decision, I think I saw it like plus 410, which is kind of ridiculous. But I think Alvarez gets him out of there. Next, we got Johnny Parsons going against Danny Roberts. We have Danny Roberts minus 125, Johnny Parsons plus 105. I have a couple bets here. I have the under 2.5 rounds, 1.5 units on it at minus 135. It's around there still. And then I also have a half unit shot on Parsons to win inside the distance. So this is more so a fade on the durability of Danny Roberts. Danny Roberts, one of the least durable fighters in the UFC. This guy has 6 finish losses, The one loss where he did lose by decision against Francisco Trinaldo, this guy was hurt on multiple occasions. I think in like multiple times in that second round, the third round, just wobbling over the cage. He's now 36 years old. He's not getting any younger at this point. I don't think Parsons is that great. That's why you see money coming in on Roberts, but it literally only takes one shot, and I think Roberts probably gets knocked out here at some point. The reason I probably like the under a little bit more is there has been some talk of, Parsons dealing with a lot of injuries, dealing with some concussions. He has not fought in a very long time, and Roberts is the better fighter. So I think the under 2.5 rounds is definitely the solid way to go. But I did get a little bit greedy and also add on a half unit on Parsons inside the distance at plus 160. I think he finishes Danny Roberts here for like the seventh. That's going to be like the seventh finish loss for Danny Roberts. Moving on, we got Daniel Marcos going against Davey Grant. I talked about a couple finish-onlys I like this week, and this is another one of them. I think that the most likely scenario here is Marcos just picking apart Davey Grant across 15 minutes, but I don't see Marcos finishing Davey Grant. I think if there's a finish in this fight, it does come from the Davey Grant side. Davey Grant just as tough as it comes. Whenever he does get finished, it is typically by sub. Marcos has 0 submissions on his record. And if Davey Grant does win this fight, I think it's probably by knockout. Davey Grant, instead of that money line, I like that finish only for Davey Grant. It's currently plus 105. I have a 1-unit shot on it at plus 100. I think that line probably should be flipped. I mean, I think if this fight does finish, Davey Grant is going to be the one doing the finishing. So give me Davey Grant, finish only, plus 100 for 1 unit, and is now even better at plus 105. Moving on, we have Lerone Murphy going against Joshua Culibao. This is my only money line bet of the week. I have 1.5 units on Lerone Murphy at minus 130. Yeah, it's a close fight, but it's a fight where there's just a lot of things going for Lerone Murphy here. This is going to be the first time where Lerone Murphy's fought primarily a striker. This guy's used to, guys taking him down. He's used to fighting, BJJ black belts, guys that want to get him on the mat. And he's shown horrendous takedown defense. And even with that horrendous takedown defense, he's still doing enough to win some of these fights. Joshua Culibao has landed a massive 0 takedowns in the UFC. So I think these guys are going to strike for 15 minutes. I actually think if there's any wrestling on either side, it's actually going to come from the Lerone Murphy side as well. So I like that. We are in, London, which is going to favor a guy like Lerone Murphy. If this fight is close competitive, which I do think it is, I think that's going to be in favor of Lerone Murphy. And if this fight does go to decision, who are the judges going to give it to? Joshua Culibao from Australia or the hometown undefeated guy in Murphy? And I think it's probably going to Murphy. Joshua Culibao, long flight from Australia to London as well. Just a lot of things going in favor of Lerone Murphy. I think he has more ways to win this fight as well. And like I said, if it's close, I think it's going his way. 1.5 units, Lerone Murphy, minus 130. I think people are very low on him after he lost his last fight to Gabriel Santos. But obviously this is a completely different matchup where Santos is a BJJ black belt who looked to take down Murphy the entire fight. And Joshua Culibao is not that at all. So completely different matchup. Give me Lerone Murphy to get it done here. Next, we got Fares Ziam going against Jai Herbert. This is one of those fights where there's a lot of spots, like a lot of different spots sticking out to the point where I'm just going to pass on this fight. Like, I think the over 2.5 rounds at minus 150 is solid. I think the Jai Herbert plus 3.5 point spread is solid. And I even saw a bet on Bet365. It was Ziam to win by either knockout or decision, that double chance at plus 100. Like, there's a couple things sticking out for this fight, but I don't want to really bet an over in a Jai Herbert fight. Jai Herbert has been finishing all of his losses, but Ziam's not really a power puncher. I'm going to pass on this fight, but I think my favorite spot would probably be the over, but I just can't get there. Next, we got Andre Muniz going against Paul Craig. I like the under here in this one. I have 1 unit on the under 1.5 rounds at plus 110. It is currently plus 105. Not much line movement there, but this is a Paul Craig fight, and it's not too often you see a under 1.5 rounds in a Paul Craig fight at plus money. He's obviously coming down a weight class here from 205 to 185. I think these guys are going to get after it early. And just like the first fight that I think both guys are weirdly live for a knockout is because both guys have been knocked out a combined 8 times. And then obviously this fight hits the mat. Both guys are live for a submission. So give me the under 1.5. And I also did parlay up the fight doesn't go the distance, which is a variable playable price in my opinion. I mean, it's a Paul Craig fight. The fight doesn't go is only like minus 260 this week, which is kind of crazy. I would probably be even adding on to that, but I already have the under 1.5, and that fight doesn't go in a parlay. So I'll talk about both my parlays at the end of the video here, but that was a leg that I do have. That fight doesn't go in this fight. Next, we got Nathaniel Wood going against Andre Fili. The spot I have been looking at was the plus 3.5 point spread for Andre Fili. I think that's like minus 160. Not going to quite get there, but I think this fight could be a little bit closer than this line does indicate. I think Wood ultimately does get his hand raised. We are in London. If it's a close fight, which I think it is, it probably does go his way. But I think Fili can definitely have some success here. I would not touch the minus 190 of Wood. If anything, it's a dog or pass, and ultimately I am going to be passing on this one. Then we have the co-main event, Molly McCann going against Julio Stollerenko. I do have two bets here. I have the under 2.5 rounds, 1.5 units for at minus 130. That line has moved a little bit to minus 150. And then I have Molly McCann to win inside the distance at plus 135 for a half a unit. Julio Stollerenko, to everybody's surprise, she made championship weight today. She looked pretty good doing so. And that doesn't really change my thoughts about the fight whatsoever. I think Molly McCann starches Stollerenko here. If this fight hits the mat in any type of way, though, Stollerenko is going to be very live for a submission. She has, I think, 10 wins, 9 of which coming by first-round armbar. So, yeah, if this fight hits the mat, she probably potentially subs Molly McCann, which Julio Stollerenko first-round sub is like plus 850. If you like Stollerenko, I mean, that's how you play her. This money lines came down a lot throughout the week. I think Molly McCann's the better fighter. I think she puts it on her, and I think she finishes Stollerenko, and I think it's early as well. Like the under, like Molly McCann inside the distance. But if you like Stollerenko, that first round sub plus 850 is pretty solid. All right, and then finally we have the main event, Tom Aspinall, Marcin Tybura. I did parlay up Tom Aspinall, minus 450s around there still. I think it's a great matchup for Tom Aspinall. I think the UFC is definitely doing Tom Aspinall a favor here. They're giving him a top 10 guy, but barely a top 10 guy in Tybura. I think he's actually ranked right on that top 10 mark. They're not rushing him back. I'd like to see, they're trying to get him a win here. They're trying to get him a win, a first round win, and I think he does go out there and finish Tybura in the first round. Is the line wide? I don't really think so, to be honest. I mean, there's still some unknowns with Tom Aspinall. Like, what does he look like when this fight hits the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round? But quite frankly, I don't think we get there. I don't think we're going to get there for a very long time. Tom Aspinall, I think he finishes Tybura within the first couple minutes here. Give me a Tom Aspinall parlayed up, and then I also parlayed up the under 2.5 rounds. So my two parlays are Aspinall parlayed with Makhmud Muradov that came out to minus 150. I have 1.5 units on it. And then my other parlay is Aspinall Tybura under 2.5 rounds, minus 425, parlayed with Craig Muniz. Fight doesn't go the distance, minus 285 that came out to minus 150 for 1.5 units. I have the DKC Alvarez fight won't start round 3, 1.5 units, minus 150. Roberts Parsons under 2.5 rounds, 1.5 units, minus 135. McCann Stollerenko under 2.5 rounds, 1.5 units, minus 130. I have the Michael Parkin finish only, 1.5 units, minus 120. I have a unit on the Oshmos finish only, one unit, plus 160. A unit on the Grant finish only, plus 100. A unit on the Alvarez Filio fight doesn't go the distance, plus 100. A unit on the Craig Muniz under 1.5, plus 110. Molly McCann inside the distance, half a unit, plus 135. Johnny Parsons inside the distance, half a unit, plus 160. Makhmud Muradov inside the distance, half a unit, plus 135. 0.15 unit sprinkle Muradov sub 2, plus 3,200. And then 0.10 unit sprinkle Muradov round 3 sub, plus 5,000. And then Lerone Murphy, my only money line bet, 1.5 units, minus 130. A lot of action on this card, a lot of violence. Looking forward to it. Best of luck, everybody, for UFC London, and we'll talk to you guys very soon. See you later.